So the NBA's Eastern Conference. Right now it's the most stacked conference in the NBA. So let's take a look at it. Last year, the top 8 teams in the East were the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Toronto Raptors, the Chicago Bulls, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Even last year, the East was pretty good. But now let's take a look at every team roster coming into the next season. First, let's start off with the number 1 seed last year, the Miami Heat. This year's Miami Heat team is basically the same team they had last season. This Miami Heat roster had guys like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, also Kyle Lowry, Victor Oladipo, Caleb Murray, Bam Adebayo, and of course Jimmy Buckets. I see this Heat team being top 5, but of course Jimmy Buckets and Bam Adebayo leading the way. And Tyler Hero, of course, is going to be a force on the bench. But now let's move to the second seed. The second seed being the team that made the NBA Finals, the Boston Celtics. This Celtics team added a much-needed point guard in Malcolm Brogdon. During the NBA Finals, you could clearly tell that the Boston Celtics needed a real point guard. And now they got that in Malcolm Brogdon. Even though I don't think he'll be starting for the Boston Celtics. But let's talk about the rest of the roster. For the Celtics, they kept guys like Grant Williams, Al Horford, Robert Williams, and Marcus Smart. And they also added Gallinari. But sadly, he won't be able to play for them this season. He's out with an injury. But moving past that, they of course had guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Those two players being the players who are going to lead the charge. I see this Celtics team still being the top 3 team in the East. But let's move past that and talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. This Bucks team last year was the 3rd seed. And in the playoffs, they went to 7 games with the Celtics. But sadly couldn't pull it off because their second best player, Chris Middleton, was injured. But now let's talk about their roster. The Bucks coming into the next season will have Wesley Matthews, Bobby Portis, Serge Ibaka, Brook Lopez, the Menace, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and of course the best basketball player in the world, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I actually think this team will be the number 1 seed next year. But let's look at the next team, which is the Philadelphia 76ers. The 76ers was the 4th seed last year. They also made a blockbuster trade to get James Harden, but their playoff run wasn't that spectacular. It ended in the second round to the Miami Heat. But let's look past that and see how their roster looking now. This Philly team had guys like Daniel House, PJ Tucker, Shake Middleton, Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, the Beard, James Harden, and of course Joel Embiid. This team would be like the 6th or 7th seed. I know that sounds like a bit of a stretch, but I don't think this team would be that high next year. But maybe in a couple months I'll look dumb for having this take. But let's move on to the next team. The next team being the Toronto Raptors. This Raptors team was the 5th seed. They had a record of 48-34. And then the playoffs they played the Philadelphia 76ers. And was only able to pull out 2 wins during the series, which means they got sent home in the first round. But they also had something good happen to them. Scottie Barnes was able to steal the Rookie of the Year from Evan Mobley. So I guess that's a plus. Let's look at their roster now. Next year, the Raptors will have Otto Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., Ron Harper Jr., Josh Jackson, Chris Boucher, Thaddeus Young, Gabe Brown, Scottie Barnes, Fred VanVleet, and of course Pascal Siakam. And I honestly and truly believe this team will not make the playoffs. The East is just too deep. I think they'll get a play-in spot and then get eliminated in the play-in. I don't really think this Raptors team can keep up with the other teams in the East. But let's move past LeBron and move on to the next team. The next team being the Chicago Bulls. Last season, the Bulls were taking the lead by soaring. Of course, until some of their players got injured. But they did have a record of 46-36. And in the playoffs, they played Milwaukee Bucks. But they were only able to win 1 game out of the whole series. But let's see how their roster looking now. This Chicago Bulls team consists of Goran Dragic, Derrick Jones Jr., Javonte Green, Andre Drummond, Kobe White, Lonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, DeMar DeRozan, and of course, Zach LaVine. I think this team would be a play-in team. Because like I said before, the East is just packed. But the Bulls might come out and be a sharker team again. But even if they do have a good record in the regular season, they won't make it far in the playoffs. DeMar DeRozan is not that guy in the playoffs. And I don't think Zach LaVine can do it all by himself. But let's move on to the 7th seed, which is the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets last season was supposed to be a top 3 team in the East. And it was supposed to be competing for a title. But with Kyrie missing a lot of games due to not getting the vaccine, Kevin Durant missing a couple of games, and with the Nets only having James Harden, the Nets fell down to the 7th seed. But during the season, the Nets traded James Harden to the Philadelphia 76ers, in which they got back Steph Curry, Andre Drummond, and Ben Simmons. But Simmons is out with a back injury. But let's move to the play-in. The play-in, they played the Cleveland Cavaliers, an injured Cavs team I might add. And in that game, the Brooklyn Nets win and go on to play the Boston Celtics. And in that Celtics series, the Nets got swept, which was a huge surprise. But now let's move past that and talk about their roster. Coming into the next season, the Brooklyn Nets will have T.J. Warren, Cam Thomas, Patty Mills, Nick Claxton, Royce O'Neal, Joe Harris, Kessler Edwards, Seth Curry, Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, and of course, Kevin Durant. I think the Brooklyn Nets will be a top 5 team in the East. I think a 3-headed goal, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, and Kevin Durant would be a great team in the East. But only time will tell. Now let's talk about the real 8th seed, the Cleveland Cavaliers. This Cleveland Cavaliers team really shocked the world. They were able to have 2 All-Stars, and they was able to win 44 games even though they was riddled with injury this whole season. They also had a guy named Evan Mobley, the real Rookie of the Year, but I'm not going to get into that. So let's talk about the play-in. In the Cavs' first play-in game, they played the Brooklyn Nets. They were missing Jared Allen this game. So in this game, the Cavaliers sadly lost to the Nets. And now we head to their second play-in game. where they'll play the Atlanta Hawks. And in this game, the Cavs sadly lost again. But let's move past that and talk about the roster they have now. This Cleveland Cavaliers team consists of Dean Wade, Lamar Stevens, Kevin Love, RJ Nembhard, Isaiah Mobley, J.D. Osman, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and a new Cavalier, Donovan Mitchell. I think this Cavaliers team will be a top 2 team in the East. I actually think this team can make the finals. My bias aside, I think the Cavs can make the finals. Only time can tell. Alright, so that's it for this video. I don't like asking for this, but if you like this video, can you sub and like? I mean, it's not that hard. The button is right there. But for real now, that's all I got for this video. I'm out.